So, the Florida Panthers. I realized after the first video I did there that I was wearing my Panthers jersey and that I was going to be discussing the Panthers because they hired a coach, Bob Boughner. So, the Boogeyman, as he was known as a player, tough as nails. He had a pretty decent career as a tough as nails defenseman, and now he's going to bring that to Florida. All of his numbers look good in terms of his career as both a player and as a coach. Windsor Spitfires coach, assistant coach in San Jose before this move was made, and in general he's been well regarded. Now, Florida's an interesting case because they are poised for a bounce back year next year. With Dale Talon back in charge of personnel decisions, and now with what appears to be a solid coach with Boughner, I really believe Florida can turn it around next year. I think they showed signs this year that they weren't as bad as their record, and I believe that's accurate. They're not the only team in the NHL that wasn't as bad as their record, and I think next season already looks like it's going to be fantastic too. I'm actually kind of stoked because what's going to happen here is that between free agency, a flat salary cap, which I'm going to have to talk about, and the expansion draft, all these things, it's going to flatten things out a lot in terms of which teams are more competitive than which others. I'm optimistic about Florida's chances next year. I think with Boughner, I think you'll see a strong commitment to defense. I think you'll see a tough team. I think you'll see, if this is what Florida wants, I think you'll see Talon target guys who are big and strong to play those bottom six roles and to play 5-6 defensemen. And again, I was a fan of Boughner's as a player because he's one of those interesting stories. And it's easy to get caught up. Like looking into last night's Pittsburgh. Okay, Pittsburgh's won their Stanley Cup, and there's Crosby, and there's Malkin, and there's all the big stars. The guys to me that are more interesting are like Ron Hainsey. 900-plus games, his first Stanley Cup playoffs, and he wins the Cup. Kuhnhackl, 2 Stanley Cup rings. He could end up being a victim of a numbers game at some point and being out, but he's won back-to-back Stanley Cups. He is the Rick Chartraw of this generation, where someday people are going to say, oh, one of the great teams ever is going to be Pittsburgh. And I know people aren't going to like that, but it's true. And his name's going to be on 2 Stanley Cups. He's a good player. So is Rick Chartraw. But, he's not a guy that springs to mind. Matt Cullen as well. A lot of Stanley Cup rings for that guy. He's been kind of sort of fantastic. Those are the stories that interest me. So Bob Boughner, definitely in terms of his playing career, interested me a lot. Let me take a look here. I looked up his images because, of course, Boughner, interesting player. Ended up playing 630 games in his career, had 1,382 penalty minutes. I remember he was tough as nails. I remember he wasn't, like I said, he wasn't a top 4 guy, but he was good. Windsor Spitfires won 2 championships with him as coach. And then 2010, 2011, he was an assistant for Columbus. He went back to Windsor, spent 4 years there. They missed the playoffs twice when he went back. And then the last 2 years, he's been an assistant in San Jose. So his coaching resume has 11 years on it. And, he has championships to his name. He's a good coach. In his NHL career, he played in the following. I got to make sure I'm going far enough back here. He moved around the AHL a bit, and then he was with Buffalo, Nashville, Pittsburgh, Calgary, Carolina, and Colorado. So he moved around. And he was a deadline acquisition on, it looks like, 2 separate occasions. And, the most games he played in any playoff year was 2001 in Pittsburgh. He had 18 games. He ended up playing 65 playoff games in his career. So, unheralded as a player, but tough. And it's a good hire, I think. I'd like to know what Florida fans think. So Florida fans, I haven't addressed you guys directly in months, and I apologize for that. But I'm curious to know what you guys think. Is Florida, in the eyes of Florida fans, as ready for a bounce back season next season as I think they could be? Again, draft, free agency, what happens coming through expansion, the moves that are made by Talon, these are going to tell whether Florida's on their way up or whether Florida's not on their way up. And at the draft, I did the draft board. They've got the number 10 pick. And then they did pick up a draft pick in the first 3 rounds from Arizona at 66. But at 71, they traded their draft pick to Detroit. So, you know, they're 5 spots ahead of where they would have been. And that's the only move they made in the first 3 rounds. First 71 picks anyways. I was going to write down like every pick that had moved, but there's so many draft picks that have been moved in this draft already outside the first round. I could only get down to the 71st pick, and then I was like, that's it. I don't think anybody's going to care beyond that, but I'm getting into that in a later video. But yeah, if you're not a Florida fan, let me know what you think of the hire. Again, I think it's a solid move. I always think it's bold when you're picking a guy to be your coach who hasn't been a head coach before. I think the easiest thing to do is to go to somebody who's been a head coach before in the NHL. You know what you're getting. But much like when you go back to an ex-girlfriend, you might know what you're getting, but it's not always a better idea than going with somebody new. It might be scary with somebody new. It might be terrifying with somebody new. But it might be a lot better too. And it might be a lot better for Florida to go with a brand new coach than to recycle one from somewhere else. So kudos to them. And let me know what you guys think. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. And thank you so much for watching.